With my mind as wide open as I could get it, I visited Chandigarh in 2013 to see the city's planning, urban design and landscape architecture. Indian people tend to admire Chandigarh much more than do Western people. In a book on Chandigarh, the City Beautiful, V.S. Bhatnagar, a local businessman, wrote that it is very well planned in the layout of roads, residential and commercial areas. He's right. The roads are better. The education is better too. Incomes are higher, and the green space is more extensive than in other Indian cities. What's not to like? Well, Peter Hall, a famous Western planner, wrote that it is totally European and designed without regard for the fierce North Indian climate or for Indian ways of life. He added that the city is heavily segregated by income and civil service rank. Dutton Pomeroy say that the city shows the impropriety of hiring Western designers to plan cities for non-Western cultures. Here's an example. The city centre in Sector 17 has a large square, which Corbusier saw as a pedestrian paradise. Westerners criticise the European design style, but it is popular and attracts Indian-style open space uses. The water features may not be valued as much as they would be in a European plaza, but they are decorative and they do no harm. Corbusier did more than other modernist architects to integrate architecture with landscape, but most of his planning projects, like his Radiant City, were bad as landscape architecture, which is strange. The explanation, I think, lies partly in his childhood and partly in the abstract modernism he embraced when he became an architect. Corbusier's family lived on the 5th floor of an apartment block in what is now the Boulevard Léopold Robert in La Chaux-de-Fonds. His dad was president of the Alpine Club and took his boys walking in the mountains. Corbusier loved the local farmhouses, which tended to have good views but no gardens, because good farmers never do have time for gardening. As an artist, Corbusier believed in abstraction. Just as Picasso abstracted the human figure into geometrical forms, Corbusier and his contemporaries abstracted cities into land-use zones, for commerce, for industry, for residential use, and for green space. Chandigarh is the only built example of Corbusier's urbanism. After Lahore was lost to Pakistan in 1947, Chandigarh was planned as a new state capital. The first master plan in 1950 was by an American architect, Albert Mayer. Though often described as a garden city plan, it owes more to Frederick Law Olmsted and Horace Cleveland. The green space was planned as a greenway network. When Corbusier, Fry and Drew took over from Mayer, the principles were retained, but the roads became more of a grid. Corbusier's rule of the 7 roads aimed to classify the traffic, and then he made it a rule of 8 roads by adding cycleways. Chandigarh's roads are better and safer than those in most Indian cities. The attempted segregation is ineffective, but harmless. The roads do cut up Chandigarh, but unlike the roads in most Indian cities, they are lined with trees, evergreen banyans, and the shade is most welcome. I've cycled in quite a few Indian cities, and compared to Agra or Delhi, Chandigarh is paradise. Corbusier was interested in the aesthetic and functional roles of landscape, but not in the social role of space around buildings. In Vitruvian terms, he disregarded the utilitas, the commodity, of designed landscapes. He loved aeroplanes and often seemed more interested in bird's-eye views than in eye-level views. For him, roof space was a 5th facade, both to be appreciated from the air and to be enjoyed as a roof terrace. Perhaps the terrible winter coughs he suffered as a boy in Switzerland led to his belief that being near grass was unhealthy, damp, and a cause of rheumatism. He saw gardening as a particularly unhealthy activity, and his roof terrace on the Secretariat at Chandigarh is more a place to get an aerial view than a pleasure garden. The security men like it. Chandigarh's greenways look great on the master plan and not so good on the ground. Within the city, the only greenway being cared for is the one which follows a natural stream, Encho, and includes the leisure valley. This greenway has 3 problems. Firstly, it's built over in Sector 16, so that the continuity is lost. The stream is heavily polluted, and the green spaces are poorly designed. The valley includes a garden of fragrance, a rose garden, and a bougainvillea garden. The other greenways shown on the master plan are neglected, but could have a bright future as pedestrian paths flanked by small shops and gardens. They could be more like streets in traditional Indian towns and villages. Fortunately, the town has 2 very good open spaces on its northeast boundary. Sukana Lake was planned by Corbusier and is a very popular amenity. The rock garden which adjoins it was made illegally by Nek Chand. It's delightful and a great tourist attraction. To sum up, the large-scale landscape planning of Chandigarh is good, but the medium scale of site planning and the small scale of landscape design are disappointing. Having visited Chandigarh, I now see Milton Keynes in England as its first cousin once removed.